The scripture today is Psalm 27. I'll be reading from the New Living Translation. The Lord is my light and my salvation, so why should I be afraid? The Lord is my fortress, protecting me from danger, so why should I tremble? When evil people come to devour me, when my enemies and my foes attack me, they will stumble and fall. Though a mighty army surrounds me, my heart will not be afraid. Even if I am attacked, I will remain confident. The one thing I ask of the Lord, the thing I seek most, is to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, delighting in the Lord's perfections and meditating in his temple. For he will conceal me there when troubles come. He will hide me in his sanctuary. He will place me out of reach on a high rock. Then I will hold my head high above my enemies who surround me. At his sanctuary I will offer sacrifices with shouts of joy, singing and praising the Lord with music. Hear me as I pray, O Lord. Be merciful and answer me. My heart has heard you say, "Come and talk with me," and my heart responds, "Lord, I am coming." Do not turn your back on me. Do not reject your servant in anger. You have always been my helper. Don't leave me now. Don't abandon me, O God of my salvation. Even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord will hold me close. Teach me how to live, O Lord. Lead me along the right path, for my enemies are waiting for me. Do not let me fall into their hands, for they accuse me of things I have never done. With every breath they threaten me with violence. Yet I am confident I will see the Lord's goodness while I am here in the land of the living. Wait patiently for the Lord. Be brave and courageous. Yes, wait patiently for the Lord.
Good morning, Eden Mennonite Church. It's a joy to be with you this morning. I bring greetings from your friends and partners in ministry at Menno Media. We are delighted to serve alongside this local congregation, and we thank you for your support of the ministry of Menno Media and the ways that you are engaged in that work. We are engaged in collaborative work together, and for that, I'm grateful. Also, greetings from my home congregation just down the road, Whitestone Mennonite Church. It's a pleasure to be with you all here in this space this morning. In 2016, Disney and Pixar Animation released a movie called Finding Dory, and this was the sequel to the movie Finding Nemo. And there's this scene in this movie, there's a flashback, where young Dory, a forgetful blue tangfish, apologizes to her parents, saying, "I'm sorry, I can't remember right." To which her parents say, "Sweetie, you don't need to be sorry. You know what you need to do? Just keep swimming." And I bet you can remember that because we're going to sing a song about it. And they teach her a song, "Just keep swimming, just keep swimming." Do folks know that song in here? Some. I see some. So there's a scene in this movie where the now grown Dory is stuck in one of those tanks at an aquarium where sometimes children who can be less than careful can reach in and touch fish or other marine life. And she's stuck with her friend Hank, who is a grumpy octopus. And Dory begins looking for a way out. And Hank is curled up under a rock in the dark, scared and doing his best to hide from the chaos of these large hands dunking in the water, splashes everywhere. And Dory looks at Hank, who looks back at her with these worried eyes, and Dory says, "Hank, what's the plan?" And Hank, with all his arms wrapped tightly around him, getting as small as he can, he says, "The plan is I'm going to stay here forever." It's at that point that Dory remembers the song that her parents taught her. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And having remembered, she says, "Hank, we just need to keep swimming. What? He says, no way, listen to me, it's too dangerous to move. No, you listen to me, she interrupts. I know you're scared, but you can't give up. Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. So you've been spending time in the Psalms for the past little while. And what is the book of Psalms? I think it's helpful to understand what this book is that we've been sitting with. The Psalms can be understood as the hymn book of the Hebrew people, and that's mostly true. Each psalm is an individual unit that can be lifted up as a hymn of praise, a lament, a psalm of thanksgiving. And in treating the Psalms this way, we get to shop the Psalms. We can flip through, find a psalm that we like, pick it out, use it, and that can be true. The book of Psalms is a collection of poems and songs that's been written by a variety of authors over a long period of time, and then we're all collected and pieced together. But the Psalter is not just thrown together willy-nilly. Our hymn books, the Voices Together hymn book that's in your hymn rack right now, it has themes and it has direction and structure that we can trace through that resource. And the biblical Psalter is the same way, that there is structure and purpose to how the Psalms are curated, and there is a narrative to follow in the Psalms. The Psalms didn't start out as a complete collection. They were poems and writings and then carefully put together to provide meaning and value for the people. If you shop the Psalms and don't read the whole Psalter as a unit, you may miss some of the important narrative lines that give shape and can add value to our reading. And the Psalter isn't just songs, it does have a story that we can follow. So whenever I read the Bible, some of the first questions that I ask myself include who wrote this, when, and to whom. And I've found great meaning in understanding the authorship and construction of our biblical text, and I hope that in a little bit of exploration that can provide some meaning for you too. If you look at a contemporary translation of the Bible, you will find headings that orient you to the structure of the Psalms. And if you look closely, you'll see that the Psalter is divided into 5 books. Chapters 1 and 2 serve as an introduction to the Psalter, and then it launches into this 5-book structure. The Psalter then concludes with 5 conclusion psalms at the end that round out all 150 psalms. Theologian Tim Mackie from the Bible Project has a great summary of this structure and how it's implemented if you want to look it up, but I'll do my best to summarize in this space. So Psalm 1 references obedience to and study of the law, or the Torah. It says, "Blessed is the one who meditates on the Torah." The Psalter is a 5-book structure, and those 5 books serve as a foil to the 5 books of the Pentateuch: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the first 5 books of our Old Testament. Tradition calls those the writings of Moses. So this introductory psalm, Psalm 1, is setting up this prayer book, the whole Psalter, to the reader as a new Torah, a new teaching on how to pray and how to be diligent to the teachings that they had received in the first Torah, the one that they got from Moses. Psalm 2, then, is a poetic reflection on God's promise to David to raise up a messianic king who will usher in God's kingdom on earth, and those that follow him will be blessed. Chapter 1, or Psalm 1, begins with the word blessed, and chapter 2 ends with the word blessed. We have these bookends or echoes. That repetition matters in ancient poetry and signals something to us. We have this little introductory unit, at the outset. And these 2 chapters show us what the whole collection is going to be about. That the whole collection of Psalms serves to teach us how to pray as we strive to be faithful to Torah while waiting for the Messianic kingdom. So after those Psalms introduce us to the book, we can start to see the 5 sections. The 5 books in the Psalms have also been organized around these ideas: faithfulness and hope. And the 5 books that follow then each have their own theme and emphasis and context that grounds them. Book 1, chapters 3 through 41, focuses on the call to covenant faithfulness. In ancient poetic composition, the arrangement of the text is really important, and symmetry points us to meaning. If you look at the whole of Book 1, right in the middle, at the hinge point, in the center of Book 1 is a psalm, Psalm 19, dedicated to praising God for Torah, for these teachings. So this thing in the middle often serves as the main idea in Hebrew poetry. When Jeff Kohler was speaking here, he brought this up for you too. So praising God for the teachings in the Torah is really important in Book 1. Book 2 is grounded in this hope for a return to the temple and presents a vision of what the coming kingdom will look like. It is full of references to other prophetic writings and a vision of what the coming kingdom will look like. It is full of these ideas pointing towards a future messianic king that will bring God's blessings that have been promised. We've not realized the promise, but we are hopeful for it. Book 3, these are Psalms 73 through 89, also focuses on this hope for a return to the temple, but it is very influenced by the story of exile that the people are experiencing. The psalmist looks at the rebellion of the people and the resulting exile, where these people were forcibly removed from their homeland, and this book considers the downfall of the people, and there's a plea for God to remember God's promise. Book 4 is constructed as a response to the crisis of exile that the people are experiencing. Book 4 opens with a prayer of Moses, and it calls readers back to what happened in the wilderness of the Exodus. And the psalm calls upon God to show mercy to the people. And the middle hinge point of Book 4 is a collection of poems and psalms that name God as the true King of the world. And you'll hear many calls for celebration of God's rule over all the world in this part of the Psalter. Book 5 opens with a series of poems affirming that God hears us. The language of these psalms affirm that God is near, and that God will one day send this future king to bring about God's perfect kingdom. It's full of poetry that sustains that hope, that God will act like they did in the story of the Exodus and deliver us again. Each of the books are these different expressions of giving thanks for Torah and teaching, and then praying for the coming Messiah, faith and hope. And there's this constant back and forth in each of these books between orientation toward God through the teachings of the Torah and disorientation as the people cope with the realities of exile and political and religious oppression of their lived experience. So the readers use the Psalms to navigate that space between the comfort and order of Torah, of their teachings, of what they know, what is happening in their heads, and the chaos, discomfort, and uncertainty of their lived experience, what's happening in their hearts. And throughout the whole Psalter, We experience all of these different genres of literature and all these different styles and purposes of these psalms. We have psalms of thanksgiving, royal psalms, wisdom psalms, but at their core, there are really two types of psalms. Psalms that express pain, confusion, or anger about how horrible things are for the poet, and they call on God to do something about it. And there are psalms of joy and celebration that draw attention to what is good in the world. And we summarize these with just the labels of lament and praise. These psalms of lament and praise are sprinkled throughout the Psalter in different forms and genres. But psalms of lament predominate the first three books of the Psalter, while psalms of praise outnumber lament in the latter two books. The Psalter concludes with those 5 psalms at the end that each offer a call to praise. Hallelujah is in each of those psalms, this word that's a shorthand invitation to praise Yahweh. The whole Psalter is arranged in this way that shifts the reader from lament toward praise. And the Psalter and its construction then teaches us something about the nature of prayer, the nature of worship, the nature of our faith as we walk and follow God, that we move from lament toward praise. And as we journey through life with the hope of the coming of God's kingdom, we will experience tension as we sit with that hope and try to reconcile it with the realities of our lived experience and what we observe in the world. The Psalter embodies that. The Psalter gives you permission to name the parts of life that are not going well, to name that tension. It gives permission to lament. And it also demonstrates for us that the journey of faith is forward-looking. And now that doesn't mean that our current reality will always be positive, but there is a constant movement toward hope. Torah and Messiah, faith and hope, lament and praise, they walk together and they always walk forward toward God's promise. And Psalm 27 is an example of holding both praise and lament in the same space, of experiencing both orientation and disorientation, of holding on to faith while feeling uncertain. This psalm is attributed to David, and some suggest that this psalm was written during this time when David was on the run, fleeing King Saul. There was a clear and present danger to David. He was a fugitive. He had been a humble shepherd boy, but had become really popular with the people after some military victories, quite memorably being credited for killing the Philistine warrior Goliath. And King Saul had gotten jealous and saw David as a threat to his power and influence. And there's a story of Saul being so jealous that he tried to kill David with a javelin, but David got away, and he keeps evading the king, and he lived as a fugitive for years. And it's believed that during this time, when David was on the run, is when he wrote this psalm. The language of an army coming to get him fits this experience running from the king. The psalm says, "My father and mother may forsake me." David, while he was running from Saul and trying to find a place to hide, returned to his own tribe looking for protection, and they betrayed him to the king, seeking some sort of reward for telling him David's whereabouts. The things that we read in the psalm, this is the lived experience of the author. He is a man on the run. Psalm 27 is a trust psalm. And now trust psalms are not a different genre of literature or a different style, but rather a thematic category. But within that theme, there are some patterns to recognize. Trust psalms assume the presence of threats and dangers. They do not dismiss them. In this way, trust and cries for help are compatible with one another. They happen at the same time. In Psalm 27, we hear the words of the psalmist that the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? And then the psalmist answers that question for themselves. Whom shall I fear? I shall fear plenty. Everybody will abandon me. My father and mother will forsake me. False witnesses rise up against me, breathing out violence. There is plenty to fear here. A casual reading of this psalm may lead us to think that because of their faith in the Lord, the psalmist can face any crisis without fear. However, if you hold this again and look at it closely, the psalmist begins with these words of praise, words of assurance that God will be with them, but this does not mean that the psalmist is ready or that the psalmist is confident or that the psalmist is not afraid. They are still very aware of the threats and dangers, but the psalmist resolves to just keep swimming. There is so much to be afraid of. There is so much that will try to work against you. There is so much uncertainty and disorientation. What do we hold on to when everything could and probably will go wrong? Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. Just keep swimming. For in the day of trouble, he will keep me safe. Just keep swimming. Psalm 27 positions praise and lament, faith and hope as companions on the journey. They walk together, and on that walk, they are always forward-looking toward the hope of God. Psalm 27 puts praise and lament into the same psalm in a way that few other psalms do. In other psalms of lament, you often will hear the psalmist cry out to the Lord and then follow it up with words of praise or words of assurance that the Lord has heard our cry. Think about like Psalm 13. It begins, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me?" And then it ties it up with a bow at the end and ends, "I will sing to the Lord because he has been so good to me." Ties it up with a bow, nice, clean, encouraging. It's a happy ending. We already said that the whole Psalter shifts us from lament toward praise. That's how it's supposed to go. But in Psalm 27, the author starts with words of assurance, reminding us that the Lord is my light, my salvation, my stronghold. Whom shall I fear? And then names that there is a lot to be worried about. This psalm doesn't have a happy ending, tied up with a neat little bow. They start with a bow, and then we're left with it untied. In this way, it really highlights for me the need to carry orientation and disorientation at the same time. This psalm leaves us a little bit unsteady, uncertain. Stories are supposed to bring resolution. We like it when the loose ends are tied up and the hero wins and the last chord is a major one. This time, however, the psalmist just launches us into a minor key and says, "Be strong and take heart." This is a psalm for times where things are not going well and we don't know exactly what's going to happen. We hear the words of assurance that point us toward our ultimate sense of orientation. We are walking ahead in the presence of God. Whom shall I fear? Well, maybe I should fear all of that stuff that I see coming. Looks pretty bad. In the words of Hank the Octopus, "Stay still, it is too dangerous to move." But no, keep going. Hope in the Lord. Let your heart take courage. Just keep going, even though it might not go well, even though there will be pain, even though you don't feel ready. Just keep swimming. This faith doesn't make the bad things go away, but it moves the goalposts and holds out hope as the end. This year has marked the 500th anniversary of the beginning of the Anabaptist movement, this water that we've been swimming in. And there's a book called The Martyr's Mirror that recalls stories of early Anabaptists and the way their faith put them at odds with the religious and political structures of the day. And in its pages is the story of Claudine. Claudine Levetter and her husband Piersum lived in Belgium, and they were devout Christians, and having heard the preaching of early Mennonite leaders, had turned from the Catholic Church and embraced a new identity as Anabaptists. In 1567, inquisitors hunting down and persecuting heretics came to arrest Piersum and Claudine. Piersum escaped, but Claudine, having been delayed while caring for her 4 small children, was captured and imprisoned. 3 of the children escaped, but the 4th, who was still a nursing infant, was imprisoned with her. And despite imprisonment and interrogation, Claudine refused to recant. There was an opportunity to escape from prison, and other prisoners did, but she couldn't manage to escape with her baby, so she stayed behind. One other man in that company stayed behind with her, so she wouldn't be alone. Her baby was taken away from her and used as a bargaining tool by interrogators, hoping to force her to recant, and still she did not denounce her faith. She never saw her baby again, and nobody knows whatever happened to the child. Claudine endured a year in prison, and then authorities ordered the execution of all heretics. And Claudine and the unnamed man who had stayed with her were both sentenced to death, he to be burned and she to be buried alive. As her death sentence was announced, Claudine began to sing. She began to sing Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? One person that was present at her execution wrote that she sang so beautifully and joyfully that bystanders wept, and that authorities had her gagged so she wouldn't die singing praise to God. Through the words of Psalm 27, we declare our trust in God. We proclaim the hope that we carry. And then we acknowledge that carrying that hope does not make life any easier. It does mean that we declare with boldness that despite all that we may encounter, despite all the chaos and disorientation, despite sickness and death and destruction and turmoil, we commit ourselves to continue walking forward toward the hope that we find in God. Just keep swimming. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Wait on the Lord and be of good courage. Whom shall I fear? Just keep swimming. Amen.